What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the 26th episode. It's every time we say a higher number, it feels cooler. It feels like we're progressing with the goals, and I like it. But welcome, everybody. This is probably going to be my favorite episode. Someone could compile 7 times of me saying that now, but I guess it's good that we're like on this upward progression of better episodes. But yeah, this is going to be a really, really awesome episode. Probably just going to really just shoot the shit about science and religion and conspiracy theories. I know I want to ask about astrology specifically because that's what I try to combat on TikTok with people, which goes very slowly, but we can get into all that. Cease, why don't you give everybody a rundown on what we're going to do today, and we'll just get started.
Yeah, so we're probably, like you said, we're going to go over some of the misconceptions about science from both the religious community and maybe even the not religious community. Go over some conspiracy theories like, anti-vaxxers and the different things of that sort. I'm excited for our guest today. I'm very thankful that he took time to go on our little show here.
Absolutely.
Considering he has a huge following, and so I'm happy that we can have this conversation. So.
Yeah, and for the little that don't know, I'm gonna play a little clip and kind of introduce Dave this way. I clipped this out because I just found that when I listened to this, I was laughing so hard. So maybe everyone else finds it as funny as I did.
Number 3, all flat earthers say the same 2 things about water. The first is water doesn't curve, and the second is water finds its own level. What's most hilarious is that even in the tool called the level, which only works because gravity exists, there is a curved bubble right in there. If the bubble is curved, what is the liquid, which is mostly water, doing around that bubble? It curves. It is absolutely astonishing how the things you repeat from Flat Earth videos are incompatible with even the most trivial everyday observations. You should acknowledge that.
He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave explains.
So, Professor Dave, thank you for joining us. I had to throw that clip in there.
Of course, yeah.
I thought it was absolutely hilarious because I got started in debate doing flat Earths because I actually had a flat earther is what I think had a big paradigm shift for me, having a conversation with someone years back and not knowing how to defend myself, and why the earth was round. And so I walked away from the conversation going, shit, I just got destroyed because I don't know anything. And I was like, what, was that guy right? And so I ended up, and of course, looking into it, I started like, well, now this is cool. I understand. I have knowledge. This is a really cool thing. And that kind of snowballed from there to eventually doing a show like this. But, so that kind of spoke to my heart because I have heard that phrase over and over again as the finding its level. And so I wish I would have had the ability to think of that.
I want to arm everyone with their talking points, their responses. Yeah,
exactly. So, but again, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so if for anyone that doesn't know, do you want to kind of maybe give a background for them or maybe any information you might think that might be necessary?
Sure. I mean, I'm a science communicator that focuses mainly on a YouTube channel called Professor Dave Explains. My background is in chemistry. I did a bachelor's in chemistry, most of a master's in organic chemistry, switched over to science education, but in the process of getting those degrees, studied obviously a lot of chemistry, but also some physics, some biochemistry, some math, a little bit of astronomy, a flavor, a little taste of some other subjects. So I started a YouTube channel in 2015, really just as a way to kind of make some passive income. I was hoping, that maybe I would have some success and I could generate a little bit of passive income with the channel. So first thing I did was just my organic chemistry lectures that I used to deliver at the university that I used to teach at. So I just delivered my my lectures to camera just as I would to a class, and then those were received well. So I did some general chemistry tutorials with green screen and animations and stuff, and then those did well. So I did biochem and physics, and I just kind of like went through everything I know or have any business talking about, and honestly, even probably a little bit past where I have any business talking about. And now it's growing even more. I'm hiring writers, so I'm covering topics that I had no knowledge of, but I hire PhD students or scientists in their field to write up the scripts, which is really fun for me because I learned, like, I'm doing immunology content right now, and I'm just learning all of this awesome stuff about the immune system. And so it's really my main gig now. I'm a little over 5 years in. It's my entire income, or most of my income, and it's just, I've been so happy about the progress and looking forward to keeping on growing the channel. So that's what I do.
That's really great. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and actually, you were recommended. Well, I say you were recommended, but I had already had previous, obviously, knew your content. But so the person that said, "Hey, you should get Dave on," is actually an educator themselves, and maybe see. I don't know if you want to elucidate on that, and we can go into maybe some discussion here.
Yeah. So my brother is a physicist professor, or a physics professor, and he worked at NASA for a while. He studies black holes. He knows a good amount about quantum mechanics. I think his field of expertise is general relativity, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. But he recommended your channel to me.
Cool.
And so thanks again for being here.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love talking. So
yeah. Well, I guess we could just kind of jump into the pseudoscience aspect of it right away.
Yeah.
And maybe bridge into some of the creationist stuff I know I have questions about. And then there's a question I have about polyploid speciation, which I think would be pretty good for a lot of people that have in our last conversation that we had. Would be good for you to elucidate on. But the first thing I would say or what I want to ask you is, like, what is it that you see? Like, when I talk to a lot of people that believe in pseudoscience, is that they'll kind of have this idea where science and whatever it is, whatever claim they have, whether it's astrology or healing crystals or whatever it might be, they either can mix, they can coexist, or they can't. But it's always used as a response to kind of deflect, in a sense of like not having responsibility for the substantiating the claim in the first place. Like, what do you think it is that gets people to this, like, they don't mix, or I don't want to go through the rigorous process, so to speak, with my claims?
You mean, why don't they feel that they have to substantiate their worldview empirically or scientifically?
Sure. And when faced with evidence, like, why is it they're still kind of like this shape shifting of?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you base your entire identity around a belief or a handful of beliefs, whether that's a religious belief or some kind of pseudoscientific belief or practice, it's the human psychology is such that we tend not to expose ourselves to information that's going to require that we restructure our entire identity. So if somebody really wants to believe in astrology or quantum mysticism or any of these things, it's not that they have no hope of getting out of that worldview. It's just that it's not going to be so easy. It's not going to be so easy. It's like, here are some facts, and like, oh, okay, I will change completely now from my core outwards.
Sure. Yeah.
But I some people go so far as to say that it's absolutely futile and that we should never, ever try to convince anybody of anything. And I think that that's wrong. And so, for the first 4 years of my channel, I focused entirely on academic tutorials. But lately, I've been starting to branch into sort of the debunking stuff, whether it's really fringe, insane things like flat Earth, or things that actually a large percentage of the population entertains. I'm very, very interested in public perception of science and public science literacy. And when there are false narratives that are adopted by some percentage of the population, I really, really want to be one of those people that goes to the public and says, look, this is wrong. This is why. Here, please let me explain this to you. And this is something that we're seeing a lot in our society right now because it's so important. Science communication is not a brand new field. I mean, it's been, Sagan, everybody knows about Carl Sagan. He was an early pioneer of science communication, and, a lot of other people. But now, as of the past 3-4 years, we're really seeing a lot of young people go into science communication deliberately as a field from undergrad and grad school, as opposed to being a scientist for 20 years and then shifting into SciComm. There are a lot of people such as myself. I'm part of a network of science communicators that some of us have PhDs, some of us don't. I don't have a PhD. I feel that we probably need at least a bachelor's in some science, but we are the ones who focus our efforts on the communication, to speaking to the public, because scientists, they're busy doing science. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Some of them want to take extra time on the side and do communication, but many or most of them don't, and nor should they have to. They're scientists. They're busy doing science. I'm not doing any science. I don't like doing science. I like learning science and explaining science and talking to people about science. That's what I like to do, and that's what I do for a job, for my life, for my career. So, and there are a lot of people like me. So yeah, that's what I've been focusing on a lot lately.
I think that's great that you answered that way, and especially with that field, because it kind of undermine the entire idea of science, communication within science, to just assume that nobody's going to change their mind in that sense and take that perspective.
We have to try. We have to try now more than ever. As we move further into the 21st century, we're going to be encountering changes, technological advancements, so many things that are going to be really challenging for the public to interface with, because science is really complicated and it's only getting more and more complicated. And we cannot have a functioning society where the vast majority of citizens have absolutely no clue how anything works. It opens us up to being manipulated, and in fact we are being manipulated by a bunch of different angles, and we need some modicum of science literacy in the public. So that's what I try to work towards.
Yeah. Could you give me some examples of the manipulation you're referring to and some of these misconceptions that are found?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that I focus on a lot is the alt health industry. So essentially, because humans, or a large percentage of humans, are so receptive to anti-establishment narratives, a lot of people have sort of an anti-establishment bias, being that we're very paranoid about anything that we perceive as an authority, whether that be a government or a corporation, or for some people even just the scientific community. We are prone to believing these things are bad, these powers are bad, and not without basis. Governments have done bad things, corporations have done bad things. So there is a reason that people believe it or have this bias. But nevertheless, people who have this bias in a very pronounced way, they're very, very easy to manipulate, because all you have to do is serve up some narrative that villainizes an authority like a government or a corporation or an industry or whatever, and they will just believe anything you say. And so we see this in alt health in particular, a villainization of Western medicine, a villainization of really just scientific progress in general, kind of, but obviously more pronounced in the realms of like health and wellness, because not everybody cares about like what particle physicists are doing necessarily, but everybody cares about medicine and my body and my health, and obviously we all care about that. So it's just the alt health industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Of media and products and supplements and all natural this and holistic that, and an enormous percentage of it is either misleading or downright fraudulent, and a very alarming percentage of people entertain these kinds of products and narratives because the narratives are so convincing, and the people who push these narratives are so convincing with their rhetoric.
Well, it's kind of like you present this, you package up this abductive argument or hypothesis in such a way that emotionally appeals to that person. Yes. All they need is that hypothesis. They don't actually need to take the steps of verification or the falsification. That's not a concept in the mind, to them, nor would it affect them, I think. But
absolutely.
Would you say are there any redeeming qualities about Eastern medicine of any kind, or is it more or less all just type of New Age nonsense?
I mean, I wouldn't quite go so far as to definitively say that it has zero value, but I mean, pretty close to. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it's like when obviously these ancient traditions have something to them in the way of like, okay, yoga is a very meditative practice. So people who do yoga, if you are doing yoga in a meditative way, it's saying that like, just if you enjoy the benefits of yoga in a fitness and just like mental health kind of way, that's great. But then there's sort of this flavor of yogi and yoga obsessed person that then goes into this thing of like the chakras and the
Right.
I can do anything with my mind and all this. And it's like none of that is real.
Right.
And so if you're going to treat that as sort of like a vague worldview or something that you want to like think about or entertain in your mind, that's fine. But when that crosses over into the realm of dissuading people from legitimate medical treatment, if you're dealing with somebody that genuinely thinks that instead of getting surgery, they should do Reiki or something like
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
This is criminal. This is criminal. Anyone who encourages people to avoid legitimate medical treatment for these other kinds of practices or philosophies, that should be treated as a criminal act.
Yeah.
So
it's insane how much you'll see that on TikTok, by the way. It's just
all
like
over the place. It's
You just remind me of something that I want to just touch upon real quick. I had a class when I was still in the university. This was when I was getting my bachelor's, not even my master's. That was a stress management course. That's what it was called. It was like one of the random credits I just had to take. And this professor was literally teaching Reiki and like new age bullshit as science. And it enraged me. I remember just in the middle of the class being like, this is not science. You're taking things out of context that you don't remotely understand and passing it on as science. And these students who don't know any better and see you as a teacher are just kind of assuming that, well, it must be true because it's what I'm being told in a classroom. And it was, like you said, I think it was criminal. And I remember I went, to the board, and there was a lot of conflict there because I thought it was completely unethical what was happening. And she hated me because I was constantly being like, yeah, this is not actually substantiated by science.
Yeah. It's not appropriate for a university setting. There is freedom of speech, so I'm not going to say that it should be illegal for anyone to say these things or have a YouTube channel that says them. But I'm a person that is going to want to push back and fight that. When there is misinformation, there needs to be another voice of reason that is at least as loud or louder to counteract this influence.
Well, and you get the response that I get a lot because like not many people go after like the spiritual community, at least on there. So I've become like the antichrist of the spiritual community, and so they get this kind of like, well, you're being arrogant or you're being kind of a douche for attacking the beliefs, right? But it's like, I mean, it's such a bad rhetoric because all I have to say at that point is, well, it's part of my beliefs to challenge people's beliefs, right? And so you're disrespecting my beliefs, which would be hypocritical of you to do because your whole thing is to respect beliefs. My belief is to challenge yours, right? And so you get this weird pushback where I guess it kind of goes back to my initial question with the shape shifting. It just seems like at all cases, like the truth gets close to you, and it's like this weird kind of get out of the way. Like I don't want any part of it deliberately, almost. I
mean, there are different tiers of it. You can compare sort of the quantum mystic and then like a religious person. So like a religious person, if you're like, okay, these are my beliefs which inform how I think I should be. I want to be this kind of person. Like maybe I want to be a nice person because blah blah blah, religious reason. No problem. If you say, this is my religion, therefore these are what the laws should be, or this is what you should have to do. Nope. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Now with the quantum mystic, on the other hand, if somebody says like, oh, I believe that there's this kind of God because I don't know, some esoteric reason. All right, I don't care. But the moment you start making very specific claims about the nature of physical reality.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm not as offended as like the religion and the laws and all that, but you're objectively wrong, you know, and
Right.
I'm going to explain to you why you are objectively wrong, you know. And
Sure.
with the quantum mystic in particular, this is a movement that's really been gaining steam since, like, you know, Deepak Chopra and these people in like the 80s. And it's just abject nonsense, and it's very easy to diagnose. I know it's very easy to tell where this stuff is coming from. You take these classic experiments in quantum physics and just misinterpret them, and then layer your nonsense on top, and
Right.
it's just shockingly easy to see where the material is coming from. But it's you know, it's just a bunch of nonsense to get people to pay money for books, pay money for seminars, pay money for you know, healing sessions or whatever it is. And it's you know, maybe not criminal, but really, really bad.
Well, there's so much money. I mean, there's people that
Yeah.
are doing astrology readings and tarot card readings and all this kind of stuff. It just goes
Right.
beyond what I think is an appropriate means of. It just seems that, like, the people that buy into it's like, clearly there's a financial aspect to this that you've bought into. I don't see how, you know, in the same breath that you claim all these elites and things that are controlling you, you don't see how easily you're being controlled.
You're being manipulated by these snake oil salesmen. You know,
Exactly.
you know, am I saying, you know, would I say that that it should be illegal for anyone to do astrology readings? No, I guess not. But I want to help show the world that it's wrong and dumb, and don't do it. You know what I mean? I want to inspire people to move away from pseudoscience and actually learn science and learn actual scientific principles and have a more informed worldview. You know? So that these things will disappear on their own.
Deepak Chopra is a complete joke. Everybody like him, but see, I don't know, because what you're saying as far as whether or not it should be illegal, if it's false advertising, like if it's being advertised that actually, you know, being true, one thing is to say, like, I believe this, you're welcome to try to take part in this thing, but I'm not going to make any absolute claims. Fair enough. But if it's being advertised as this can heal you, or this is true, then I think there is some basis for that being potentially criminal, because you're actually lying to the, you know, you, like you said, these are, you know, snake oil salesmen. And I have a real problem with that.
That's why most of them cover their bases. People, you know, homeopathy practitioners and Reiki practitioners, these kinds of people, they go out of their way to advertise, like, if you have a life-threatening condition, this is not what you want to do, because they know they're going to get freaking sued. If, you know, they will get sued. So if they're smart, they cover their bases. But you know, and in terms of getting legality into it, it does get very, very sticky, because then you're endowing the government with the final decision as to what's scientifically accurate or not. So it does get tricky, and I don't really advocate for rigid censorship, but instead I just think that these people should be mocked and exposed without mercy. I mean, just barraged verbally with ridicule. I mean, depending on how malicious they are. I mean, Deepak Chopra deserves ridicule to kingdom come. Somebody with their little mom and pop Reiki shop, okay, I'm maybe not going to knock on their door and just, like, you know, berate them verbally. Sure. But I just want to be putting content out into the world in the hopes that people can see it and just accept that, no, this is not real. Don't buy into this, and it'll just take care of itself. It'll just fade away.
It's so frustrating when people like us are called closed-minded. Yeah. It's like, no, we have an open mind to what is reasonable to believe given the evidence, not just to any kind of bullshit. Yeah.
You've learned zero science, so sorry, you are not in possession of actual information with which to come to the conclusion that you've come to.
Which is why now I just kind of go with you know, people might call this my stamp, so to say, but when people have these arguments and I see it's not going anywhere, I just point out, well, look, nothing at what you say is substantiated in academia in any sense. And so, like, if you have a problem with it, like, don't even take it up with me, take it up with them, because that's you have a problem with the consensus here, and you can cite, you know, authority fallacy, which isn't actually a proper fallacy of authority.
But didn't you know that all medical research is paid for by big pharma? Didn't you know that all scientific research is invalid, or whatever scientific study I don't like is invalid? They're just, these are the loopholes that they will utilize to escape having to confront the emptiness of their worldview.
Like the replication. What was it, the replication problem that people cite? I don't know if that's what it's called. I'm losing it. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I think it's the idea that like no experiment can really be replicated, or like no finding can be replicated.
I mean, I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, it's really nonsensical. Cease, I don't know if on my end it looks like you froze.
Yeah, I think my thing just froze as well.
No worries, I can still hear you, so it's not a big deal. If you have anything else there, we can go. I wanted to, or with the pseudoscience stuff, I was going to kind of bridge into taking looking at the implications of now let's look at somebody's hypothesis and compare it, right? And I guess the first thing I would think of is say to move out of the pseudoscience thing would be like look at the Christian's creation story. So there's a hypothesis there, right? What are for you would be the immediate kind of problems or implications of Adam and Eve, as opposed, for our supposed origins, especially on like a genetic level and all that. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first things first, it's objectively not a hypothesis. I mean, it's not a scientific construct of any kind. In truth, it is a plagiarized myth, as are all other Christian myths. It's a story. It's not even an original story. It's been lifted from earlier religions, just like all aspects of the creation myth and the savior from the virgin birth and all. They're all. These are just stories that have been told before, and they put some new names in there. And so you can go from the evidentiary side and say, well, there's absolutely nothing whatsoever to substantiate that anything like this has happened. It also absolutely contradicts all facts and logic imaginable, right? If Adam was made from dust, why are we not made of dust or silicates? We're not made of silicates. So that doesn't make any sense. How can a rib be like with this stuff, it's just, to me, it's so obviously allegory. Like its writers even intended for it to be taken as allegory, right? These are metaphors. This was never intended to be taken literally. It astonishes me on a regular basis that any human person could ever take any aspect of scripture literally. But
well, that actually kind of was part of my second question was to say that the theist creation stories often hide in a kind of a shroud of metaphors or allegories or whatever. I kind of call them excuses, right? But yours sounds like you're coming from a perspective to say, well, they should have never actually taken this as a way to explain biodiversity or
in fact, it doesn't, gives you that. If we all descended from two people, we'd all be horribly inbred, of course. So that's a fact you can't get around. But I mean, people who like humans love stories, and we love deriving meaning from stories, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. When you speak a truth in a very literal way, it rarely has as much meaning as when that truth is sort of delivered in a capsule of narrative with events and characters that sort of play out the truth and demonstrate the truth, And so there's nothing wrong with getting you could do this with Aesop's fables. You can do this with the scripture of any religion, or you could do it with science fiction novel, whatever you want. Stories are great, but they're stories, and anyone who treats religious scripture as that, stories to learn from, there's absolutely no problem there. I don't have any problem with that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But
how does it for you, like, I mean, I know you can only speak for yourself, but you look at that, you kind of sounds like you're saying, well, and I don't even know how I could get to truth with this, because it's clearly not giving me, direct facts about the world, or if it is in some way, it would be wrong. So clearly you're going with that. So would you dismiss it, or like, like how do you take those things? Because that's all you have is kind of this anecdotal holy
Yeah.
book. What do you
Well,
do?
I dismiss it because it means nothing to me. I didn't grow up with it. I didn't grow up with any religion, and therefore it doesn't mean anything to me. These are trivial truths about morality that, I don't need a story to tell me that I shouldn't kill anybody. I'm perfectly capable of understanding that I should not kill anybody. If whatever. I mean, look, there's a religious scripture. There's a lot of stuff in there, and people can study it, and they can come up with any kind of interpretation they want in terms of what you can learn from it and how you can be a more spiritual person or a wiser person or whatever. That's fine. Sure. But and that falls into the category of truth. I think that it's fair to say that you can derive some kind of truth from any sort of story that you want. I can derive some kind of truth from Star Wars if I want. But there are no facts. There are no facts in there. It does not tell us any factual information about the physical world that we live in. And anybody who treats it as a factual account of the origin of the universe and of life, it's just like we are so far away from having any kind of common ground with which to discuss scientific facts. It's almost hopeless, but I still like to try.
I would say I would agree with that.
Yeah, I want to show this comment. Can you guys see me now?
Yeah, you're good now.
Pseudoscience earns a lot more money than science. A capitalist society rewards the moneymaker. Are truth and capitalism at odds?
So I mean, I don't think that I would necessarily agree with that first statement. I think science earns a lot more money than pseudoscience because good science leads to technology, and so airplanes and computers and this stuff earns a lot of money, a lot more money than Deepak Chopra. Deepak Chopra sure earns a lot of money, though. I think perhaps what that person meant is that maybe Deepak Chopra earns a lot more money than like an average physicist. And perhaps that's not fair. But I think that it's more important to cite that science as a whole leads to all of our technology, which means that the second part of that person's statement also might not be accurate, just because in order for science to work, it has to be true. Right? You can't build technology on pseudoscience because it's not real. So, and in fact, that's why you can't, like, all of these claims that are made by quantum mystics and astrologers and all these things, they're empty. They do not lead to any kind of progress. Right? You can't build any kind of machine based on what a quantum mystic says. You can't do anything with it, right, other than trick people and make money. But so it's an interesting thought. I just don't think I would still maintain that capitalism is maybe not in line with all of our happiness, but it is in line with reality and facts, because you can't build technology off of science. That's not true. So
one of our recent episodes, we're talking about the concept of irreducible complexity. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you had any kind of feedback on that issue, what you think about that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, irreducible complexity is an argument that's been debunked 1,000 times, and anybody who puts it forward just is not scientifically educated. I mean, it's just the people who put this forward are creationists that, I mean, like, they don't know what DNA is. They don't know what it does. They don't know what a protein is. I mean, they're just completely science illiterate. They do not have the vocabulary to even be discussing molecular biology or anything like this, and it's just a preacher told them it and they're repeating it. That's it.
Which, by the way, speaking of proteins, that video that you have on proteins, I think I've replayed that 20 times because it's helped me more than anything I've in the 5 textbooks that I have.
Cool.
It helps me more. So I saw a comment that said, someone there said, I've tried Crash Course, I've tried my professors, I've tried my biology books, nothing's worked. This has worked. And I'm just like, I felt like I wrote that and forgot about it.
I mean, I'm very happy to, my goal with the academic tutorials, I want to deliver the light bulb moments, just to deliver the very basic comprehension, just okay, now I get the basics. Then you go back to your textbook and you get some more details. Because I mean, I try to be fairly comprehensive, but obviously I'm not covering every single fact that you could ever learn in a biology class. I'm just sort of going for the fundamentals. But I mean, it's true, like with proteins and or for example, transcription and translation, right?
Sure.
We learned since second grade, DNA is the genetic code. DNA is the genetic code. Okay, how, right? What does that mean? And creationists don't know. They don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But when you are like an undergraduate and you've learned some chemistry, maybe a little bit of organic chemistry, and then you go to biochemistry and you learn transcription and translation. You learn DNA transcript for the mRNA transcript for the protein. Right? When you finally learn all that, everything clicks. And I now get like the development of a biological organism. I understand evolution. Like so much comprehension is delivered when you finally understand that process. And it's just something that, like, why can't everybody on Earth know what transcription and translation is?
Yeah,
I
100% relate to that, because like I had a problem with kind of like understanding the codon aspect of it and how it's read through the ribosome, right? And so then once I was trying to figure out kind of the transfer RNA part, right, where you would take, I guess as it goes in, it's going to take the anticodon, right, and that's going to essentially have create the or you have that chart for the amino acids, right? Mm-hmm. Once I had saw that, like everything had just clicked in my head, where the amount of time I had spent just didn't make sense. It wasn't even like the visual representation, because I think you just use like a circle for a ribosome or whatever, but it wasn't even that. I guess it's just how you phrased it or understanding, because usually it's just when you go through it, you're learning how to remember a sentence rather than like what even the content of the sentence is even saying, right? So it's like you're just trying to remember like what a polypeptide is, even though you have no concept of what that means in the grand scheme of anything.
Yeah,
right?
When you are starting from absolutely zero comprehension of a subject, it has to be fed to you in such minute incremental pieces. And I think that is the thing that I understand that has made my content successful, because it's not like I understand biology better than biologists. I mean, biologists understand biology better than I do. It's just that I think I have a little bit of a better ability to look at somebody with zero knowledge and sort of deconstruct the pieces that need to be fed to them and in what order.
Yeah.
Exactly. Here you go. Here's the thing. And then here's a nice picture. And then here's the tRNA. You can see the anticodon and the codon line up. Here's the amino acid. The next one comes in, chink. Next one comes in, chink. And then there's, and it's just, once you see that, okay, I get like the basic thing.
Well, while we're on that topic, like what would you, a lot of creationists are going to say, DNA is a code, right? I would be interested to see like what you think about that, what the implications of that, even if that's the case, and then how you would, or if maybe you would just look at kind of the process of the codon being read as more of the code part of it, or how do you view all that?
Yeah, I get this a lot. So DNA is a code. We can call it a code. It contains information. But I think that a lot of creationists throw out this talking point of like the information has to come from somewhere or some. Information is not a substance that needs to come to be, right? It's just a word that we assign to a system when it does something that it appears interesting to us. You could take a vessel of gas particles, and you could say, all right, each of these particles has a momentum vector, right? Okay, this is information, right? There's information in the gas. It's just a bunch of gas particles flying around, but just there's information there, and DNA is information in the context of how it interacts with the system of proteins to result in protein formation. So, but it doesn't have to arrive. People are very anthropomorphic. They know that humans can encode things. Therefore, they think that a code must come from a creator. The same way that somebody like Kent Hovind loves to throw out these Strawman analogies of like a car can't be assembled by a tornado or something. A car is a man-made object. It's not a biological system. It has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about. Saying that there is a thing that has been created, therefore everything has been created.
It's so stupid.
It's so stupid. It's as much sense as saying this complex thing was not created, therefore nothing was created.
Or would it be? Would it
Logically
be?
consistent.
I am having an argument with somebody. Maybe I can clip this out. Would it be kind of like using an argument saying that a snowflake spontaneously formed, therefore the universe spontaneously formed? Isn't that equally a bad argument because
Yes.
it's a fallacy of composition?
And in fact, that's what I told him, and I acknowledged that that's not a valid argument, just the same way that his argument is not valid.
Awesome. I appreciate that clip. I'll be sure to tag the person in this clip.
Something was
Dave,
created.
what's your
therefore-
professional background again? Give me your degrees again. No,
Oh yeah.
just so I can clip that part in there too. No.
Well, just to go off of that, people get confused between the thing itself and the description of it. Like, we can talk about a phenomena using terms like information and encoding in these things, but these are simply what we're projecting onto what's taking place. We're finding a way to express this phenomena in a way that we can understand. That doesn't mean there is some form that, like, the word exists floating out there. It's an abstraction.
Yeah, the subtlety of using human-invented language to describe physical phenomena, it doesn't always perfectly line up. Yeah,
it rarely does. Like, here's two questions.
Real fast, Cecil. Before that,
Sorry, go ahead.
Just wanted to ask one other question on that before I forget it. And I lost it, so go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, hey Dave, what is one of your biggest fears for the future?
I mean, obviously, I am aware of the potentiality for humankind to destroy itself, and I fear that could happen, or some version of that where we descend into an authoritarian regime of some kind. I think a lot of people are feeling a little bit of weight lifted off their shoulders as of yesterday.
Right.
Everything seems just a little bit brighter, so I feel maybe slightly more optimistic. But yeah, I mean, I think that is a lot of what drives me to do what I do, because I feel that many of the scenarios that could play out that lead to the destruction of our species stems from the ignorance of the masses. And I don't say that with any vitriol. I just mean ignorance in the sense of not possessing scientific knowledge or political knowledge or just, I don't know, some kind of knowledge. And I want very much to inform the public as best I can. I think that I have an ability to help inform people, and I want to do that in whatever way I can. And I hope many others will do the same, because I don't want mankind to stop. I want it to keep going. And yeah. So,
yeah.
Did you find your question?
Well, it was in my head, so I remember now. Whenever you deal with, like, say, the code thing, right? I kind of look at, like, the whole implication that they're going for, at least with a coder, like someone who initially went to school for programming and design. It was or for programming, is that, like, I could take ACT and G, but if I just mash my hands on the keyboard and it only has ACT and G, I mean, is that really like code? When we look at things like non-coding sequences and stuff like that, I mean, would you say that would be kind of an argument to use, in the sense of that, is it really code if we're just kind of hitting A, T, C, and G, just randomly, and then having that kind of have its...
yeah, I mean, I suppose it makes more sense to call exclusively the genes the coding regions. But in the end, it's just a word. It's just a word. The people that throw out these kinds of arguments, if you ask them, how is DNA a code, they can't answer you.
Right.
They don't know what transcription and translation is. They just go, oh, it's the genetic code. You're like, well, why? What do you mean why? It's the genetic code. How? It's the genetic code. Like, you don't know what that means. Like, you don't even know what DNA does. So why do you think that you can be advancing this talking point? Again, it's just we tend to anthropomorphize, and humans can make codes. Therefore, they assume that only a sentient person can make a code. But it's like, look, when you have millions of years and all of these systems of molecules, and then you have some some discrepancy in what kinds of molecules will proliferate statistically because they enhance some some aspect of replication, right? It's just statistical dynamics that molecules eventually become purposed. Without any knowledge of biochemistry at all, there's absolutely no capacity for somebody to comprehend how that would work. But
Sure,
that's how it is,
The next question is, when are you going to treat us to Dave versus Kent 2?
So I issued Kent a very specific challenge, and he declined. So that's
wow.
Tells you a lot right there.
I was gonna try to host it and be like, hey, let me sneak in there. Like, hey, if you need a host.
Yeah, it was right after the debate. It left me with a sour taste in my mouth. So I didn't want him to gish gallop if we exchanged again. So I set out the rules, of what questions he would have to answer. And not only did he decline, he responded to those questions on his own on his channel, just lying
Terrible.
top to bottom. So it's all a show for his minions, pretty much.
And going back to what you were saying about, if you ask a creationist to explain the code, they're left stumped. It's the same thing. I've dealt with that when I've argued or debated people about the fine tuning, when they'll say, well, they'll try to sort of put the burden of proof on us to say, well, how did the universe become what it is? Why couldn't it be something else? And to them, the answer is, well, God put it that way. Well, how? Like, why that way as opposed to anything else? The why can continue on and on endlessly, even in their worldview, but they're okay with accepting that they don't have an answer there. But then they want to try to dismiss science or our perspective when we don't have every answer they're satisfied with.
Yeah. I mean, I consider the fine-tuning argument for a God to be maybe the only argument I can even think of or have ever heard that has even a shred of credibility to it.
I was going to ask you about that, which argument was, and I agree with you, by the way.
Yeah, because the thing is, if somebody is talking about an argument for a God that just demonstrates a complete ignorance of biological principles, then get out of here. But the truth is that we don't know why certain parameters and universal constants are as they are. Perhaps there is a multiverse, and this happens to be the one with this one. But we don't really know. And if you subscribe to a cold and detached deity that initiated the universe with the constants in place and then watch the whole show, that's not a God that offends me. And you're perfectly entitled to believe in that God because it does not contradict any scientific principles. But it is intellectually lazy, and it is a God of the gaps. It is really, there are only two places where the God of the gaps has any room to stretch his legs anymore, and that is the beginning of the universe and the origin of life, where there are still it's a very small pocket where the God of the gap still kind of sits there because we don't really fully understand.
And it's amazing, and it's amazing that people think that because we don't have all the answers, that like, for example, we don't know exactly how the origin of life is, that's somehow a defeater for evolution. Like, first of all, there's two separate theories. I run into that consistently, like just every day.
I have an actual argument in regards to fine tuning that I'd be interested in seeing what you think about this. That's not necessarily a defeater, but it's more so kind of pointing out how the constants involved might say a lot more than what actually is to be said. And so the argument goes, or I guess the counter argument would be, the mass of a neutrino is 2 to the 10 to the, I'm sorry if I'm messing this up, to the negative 37 kilograms. It's been shown that if this mass was off by just one decimal point, that is to say negative 36 or negative 38, life would not exist because if the mass was too high, the additional gravity would cause the universe to collapse. If the mass was too low, galaxies could not form because the universe would have expanded too fast. In either case, life could not exist. And so it presents a analogy to say that if this would be like measuring LeBron James in height in light years, to say that he's 2 to the 10 to the negative 16th light years in height, and if he was just 2 to the 2 times 10 to the negative 15 or 2 times 10 to the negative 17 light years in height, he would not be able to play basketball, which would be true because in one case he is a 60-foot lumbering giant, and in the other case he's only 8 inches tall. If we actually use the constants of 81 inches and that he was 4 inches shorter or taller, a difference of 5%, he would still be able to play basketball and he'd likely still be one of the best. And so what the point is trying to get across is that if you use kilograms as the constant for, say, a neutrino, then of course the fluctuation there is going to have drastic effects compared to a proper constant, which would give you maybe a 5% fluctuation and life could still persist the same way LeBron James could still play basketball. What do you think about that analogy, and what problems would you have with it?
Well, I mean, I don't think that we should be fixating on the units because the units are arbitrary. It's more there is an intrinsic value to these constants. We have to express them in our man-made units, but whatever those units are, it is irrelevant. So yeah, it's hard. I don't know enough about physics. Unfortunately, maybe there is a mechanism in place that set these constants to where they are in the first instant of the universe. Perhaps we'll learn about that at some point. Perhaps we won't. But I will have to concede that it is at current time. We don't know why the constants are as they are. But I think that the issue is it is accurate to wonder why they are as they are, because we're not talking about a small fluctuation. They could be of any arbitrary value, or not. Maybe that's not true. Maybe they couldn't be of any arbitrary value. But if they could be of absolutely any arbitrary value, then we are opening ourselves up to the possibility of them being many orders of magnitude larger or smaller, and therefore creating a universe that is not conducive to life or even stars forming or anything like that. But again, maybe they can't be of any arbitrary value.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
yeah, my limited knowledge is going to go to it seems natural that it would be relative to what we're using in measurements, but then again, I might just be missing the entire point on what we're talking about when we talk about these constants, and so that for me is something
unfortunately, my grasp of this area of theoretical physics is tenuous at best. So
but I just think that it's so delusional and arrogant for people to think that we would have these answers with our limited perception of the world, having done science for like 100, for a very short period of time, that somehow we should be able to answer the beginning of time.
No, to these people, I say, look, we have a really good grasp of everything starting at 10 to the negative 36 seconds after the initial singularity. That's a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second. From that point onwards, we've got it down pretty well. Isn't that astonishing?
Right.
Why does that not astonish you? To the point where your head explodes? Well, the answer is that they have no knowledge of cosmology. I mean, literally zero. They think that the Big Bang is a kablooey graphic and then Saturn and a comet come tumbling out.
Right.
I mean, they just have absolutely no clue about, how, energy congealed into subatomic particles. And then the first, just the progression of, I have a tutorial on Introduction to Cosmology that sort of outlines the entire Big Bang model sequentially through all the eons. That I wish detractors of cosmology would just watch and see that it's not the kablooey graphic and the planets coming out. Yes, that would be absurd, But the fact that we know that we have so much knowledge of the origin of the universe and just not that last little chunk. Come on, man! Like maybe we'll even get that too in the next 50 years. Who knows? But even if we don't, it's like, look, we have all of this knowledge. And unless you're going to sit there and take the time and learn what we already know, then you don't have a say in this conversation. Mm-hmm. If you learn all of it and then you say, hey, wait, this might not be right, here's why, or maybe it's this other thing, here's why, then I'm going to listen to you, But
and the thing is, all the knowledge we have so far doesn't need the assumption of God to function as an explanation.
Exactly.
So why would we assume that it all needs this thing that you can't even begin to support?
When I first started learning chemistry, or when I first started learning organic chemistry, I mean, I was really floored. I've 19, like sophomore year, organic 1, and I was just really learning about the command that we have over the molecular world. That we, first of all, that we even know molecules exist and know the structure of a molecule, atom for atom, is astounding. Let alone the fact that we can take molecules and we can build other molecules. We can build whatever molecule we want. This is all stuff that is way too small for us to ever see. I mean, it's just, how does that not inspire you?
Right.
How does that not really blow your mind that where we've come from, what we've done in just the 20th century and now in the 21st century in terms of advancing our understanding of the natural world, of the submicroscopic world, of the universe, and, all these things that are so far away. I mean, it's just so mind-boggling, and I lose a lot of respect for people who just don't seem to have any appreciation whatsoever for the scientific process and what science has done for humanity over the past several centuries.
And that's the thing too, is so many people will criticize science without realizing that they're entirely dependent on what science is giving us in every aspect of their life, and
every second of every day.
And it's also, I mean, that's everything that enrages me, is when you get a religious person that will say, well, without God, you have no meaning in your life, or no love, or no appreciation for things. It's like, no, I can appreciate the universe, I can appreciate everything without needing to tell myself a story that doesn't have a basis. It's you who, for some reason, psychologically, without that comfort of God, somehow fall into a vacuum of meaninglessness. But that's on them. That's not us.
Yeah, it seems that if you can like zoom into, like, there's, have love, but if you can actually figure out how it works, or have any level of component there that you understand, it now becomes, it all of a sudden has no meaning, which was always weird to me. Like, it's like once you zoom into the layers, it's just chemical processes. It's just physical. Like, as a physicist, I'm going to say everything's, a physical process, but it's weird how that negates it, right? Yeah.
Right. It's both the physical process and your human experience.
Right.
There's a great quote. I think it's, is it Feynman? I don't remember who said it. I'm probably going to butcher the quote, but it was something to the effect of, like, somebody told him, you look at a sun, or at a plant or a sunset or something, and you see you see science and molecules or whatever you see. And whereas I just see the beauty of the plant or the sunset or whatever he was talking about. And he's just like, no, you dolt. I get what you get too. I can look at the sunset and go, ooh, that looks pretty. That's trivial.
Right.
But the beauty is enhanced. Imagine how much more beautiful it is to look at the sun and know what it is, and all of the processes that are going on in there, and that all of the atoms in your body came from inside a star, and just all, I mean, it's just like, it's absolutely incredible. The wonder and awe that you feel for the natural world is incomparably greater when you educate yourself about what it is. We all get to look at a plant and go, oh, that tree looks pretty, or that sunset looks pretty. We don't lose that capacity, So
yeah, it seems odd. You have to have this ontological basis that you haven't substantiated in order to make it better. It's like, it's sad to me when I look at it from a perspective of something where the natural world's not enough, and you need this added ontological concept for which you haven't proven. It's like, well, how are you going to feel about the natural world if we ever can come to the conclusion that ontological basis isn't real at all, and that it seems at that point now we're at this weird state where you couldn't have ever loved the natural world for what it is. It had to have some prior there, and that to me I've never understood. But I think also us three all grew up similarly in the sense of that I've never been touched by religion in any sense of the word. I don't think Cease has either, and you said that you haven't. So I think it makes a lot of sense why us three are so probably headstrong against these types of, maybe I want to say headstrong, but want to put out the correct information out there. But
also, I mean, I'm in constant, I fight with this person on TikTok often who continues to maintain the position that, without, if we're all just chemicals, then nothing has any meaning or value. Like, how can chemicals produce value? And it's like,
I'll look around.
I mean, dumbass, don't you understand that the experience still exists, even if it is a product of
Yeah.
chemicals and nature? That there's a tangible difference between a bad experience and a good one. That these words are describing things that are actually real. It's irrelevant how it comes about.
But it gets much worse than that. If you are somebody that believes in an omnipotent, omniscient deity that created you and knew everything you would ever do before even having created you, then life truly has no meaning.
Right.
You are just you are an automaton destined to do what your creator forced you to do.
But that's the irony, is that because he actually used that very word. He said, in your worldview, you're just an automaton that's a bunch of chemicals. And it's like, okay, but you have the same problem. At least with my worldview, there's something that I can point to and actually observe.
Yeah.
You just make up an answer that actually results in the same thing, where we're just, and of course he threw out some, pseudo-poetic soul words.
Yeah, that's the irony. If the fundamentalist God does not exist, we might have free will. I'm not sure if we do, but we might. If the fundamentalist God does exist, we certainly do not have free will. So
right.
That's
from my perspective, the free will thing is a non-starter. I want it to be true, but in all my years of doing philosophy, I've seen no good arguments that's remotely convinced me that it makes any sense. Maybe in the future something will change. But yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess I have just a few more questions. We can kind of wrap this up. I don't want to take too much more of your time, Dave. I appreciate you even coming on to begin with.
For
sure. There's a couple things I wanted to get into real fast, and we can streamline these or make them quicker if we need to. So there's a lot of creationists that are going to say that there's no and I had this conversation, I think, with Leo, who's in the chat last night on Discord, where I was trying to explain to somebody indirect observations of evolution, and they were like, "Well, we don't actually observe this." And I was like, "Well, do you not know that an indirect observation is still an observation?" What is it?
We also literally observe it. We literally physically observe it.
we do, and that's what I kind of wanted to break into that as well. Could you would you first elucidate on maybe some indirect observations that we have, or if you would rather skip that, just kind of go into direct ones that you would think a creationist should at least appreciate or look into from that standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, we can go straight to the direct. Look, speciation occurs. Just Google list of observed speciation events. We observe new species forming. Now, the creationist is going to come back and say, well, but a salamander didn't make an elephant. So
I hate that.
They want the Pokemon evolution.
That's not how it works. It's not, that could only be possible if there was a god to do that insane,
it's the magic,
unrealistic thing. That would be magic, But look, ring species exist, where there's some salamanders over here, and then this population's a little different, this population's a little different, this population's a little different, and then you get all the way back around geographically, and suddenly these two populations are not interfertile. They're truly different species, because just over time, genetic drift and mutations, and they're slightly different. And
we see what's weird is that, like, you can use religious groups to kind of show this. Because I've had people disagree with, like, the distribution of alleles and just outright denying allele frequency change over time and stuff. And it's like, well, you can use religious groups to what is it? The Amish have the allele for polydactylism, right? And and so you could use, like, actual specific groups that isolate themselves in the sense. Of course, you're not getting to this speciation that they want in the sense, but I do find it ironic in a lot of that senses. But you have I know you've talked about polyploidy speciation, which you're going to see more often in plants than animals.
Common in a lot of plant species. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I mean, it has been responsible for a lot of speciation in the plant kingdom.
From what I've read, it seems that we have it in certain lizards. It occurs in certain lizards and certain other. I can't remember what the genus is off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know there are some animals that exhibit this as well. I don't remember off the top of my head which ones they are. Yeah, it is a little bit esoteric to understand how a differing number of chromosomes would enact actual phenotypic differences.
Yeah.
And I hesitate to try to extrapolate on that because I don't remember. I would have to like do a 5-minute Googling to to explain that. But I mean, look, the point is that, okay, number one, speciation occurs. We observe speciation. We observe the generation of new species. End of story. But number two, when they say that like, oh, like we're missing all these transitional fossils, or how do you get from a fish to a walking thing, or how do you get to a flying thing? How do you get wings, etc.? Look, you just didn't look into it at all. I mean, if you want to, like, okay, look up walking fish and flying fish. I bet you didn't know those exist, but guess what? They do, and they exist today. Those are things that exist right now. There are fish with little feet that push along the ground, and there are fish that literally fly. I mean, it's not even just gliding. There's like a little bit of flapping going on. You can see them flying above the ocean trying to escape a predator. So, I mean, these are things that exist today. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that's like the exact lineage that went from, well, it is the exact, that is sort of what happened to get fish to become amphibians and then eventually reptiles, and et cetera. But then like lizards to birds or something like that, they are not aware. There's a point mutation in chickens that causes them to grow feathers where their scales should be on their legs and feet. Because as it happens, feathers and scales, they're both made of keratin. There's just a slight discrepancy in the way the keratin is arranged. It's literally the same protein. And a point mutation, one base pair, causes chickens to they look bizarre. They have feathers all over their feet. It's really funny looking. So it's like the idea, like reptiles to birds, it's really not that hard to understand. And we have tons of transitional fossils. Archaeopteryx is not the only transitional fossil. There's dozens of transitional fossils and transitional species that are documented from, and every other thing from land mammals to whales, and from, aquatic, from amphibians to whatever, it's just that they won't lift a finger to learn anything about evolutionary biology or phylogeny.
Sure. Yeah, they'll talk about it like they're experts. I mean,
well, and it's funny because you do get some of the people that will talk, like he's saying, like they're experts about it. And I had I wish I had the actual document pulled up that I could reference, but there was I don't know if are you familiar with Gut-Sick Gibbon, Dave?
I know of her. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I thought it was hilarious, but she was kind of debunking these creationists that were talking about these orphan genes that are expressed in humans that kind of separate us, from whatever the pick of the litter they want, that makes us essentially where they would say, well, we're special in this way because of these orphan genes. So there's an actual paper, I can't remember what it's called, like de novo genes something, I can't remember what it's called, but it was published in 2015 where they looked at these orphan genes and saw that chimps actually have a lot that separate them, and other primates have them as well that kind of separate them from another species. And so you get to this point where when we found out what the expression was for, it was for ball sac tissue, it was for testicular tissue. So these creationists were like propping up this orphan gene, that separates us, and it's like highly expressive of like ball tissue. And I just thought that was like the greatest thing ever. When hopefully I'm understanding and digesting her what she's saying in that video properly, but I'm pretty sure I got the gist of it. And I thought that was just absolutely hilarious that when the people do think that they know what they're talking about, they use, they're talking about de novo genes or whatever it might be, that where they just kind of, I see the word and I say it, right?
It's endless amusement to listen to creationists use terminology they don't understand to try to prove a point that they don't understand. It's like listening to they'll do the same thing about the second law of thermodynamics prohibits.
Oh my God, every time.
You have no
idea what that means.
The second law of thermodynamics is. You have no idea what it is.
It takes like a 2-minute Google search, to just debunk. You just find any basic scientific resource. There's so much information on this, and they just repeat the same bullshit talking points. They don't put any effort.
Yeah, they
don't even realize what it's saying. Like when you go to any part of the system, right? Like the Earth is not going to have this aspect of like, I think that me and Leo, I don't know if it was me and Leo in the chat, we're having this conversation, but Dave could probably help a lot on this, but it doesn't have to do a lot with how the energy from the sun is, right? It's why like people always bring up the second law defeats evolution in this system of the fact that the earth is within itself isn't going to be subject to that same.
Yeah, I mean, what they're trying to say is that order doesn't form spontaneously. Well, you're wrong. It does every day, all the time. You know, put some water, out on a cold day, you get ice. That's order. It's an ordered lattice structure. Soap molecules form micelles, these ordered spherical structures that form spontaneously. It's literally how soap works. That's why you clean your hands when you use soap. Structure or order occurs all the time. It does not disobey the laws of thermodynamics at all. I mean, that's just end of story. You don't know what that law says.
Here's a question for you, Professor Dave. Do you think the future of education will shift from universities to places like YouTube?
It's a very good question, and obviously I have a lot at a stake on this here.
Right.
I do think that the continuing inflation of tuition is untenable, and I think that this experience with COVID and universities, where they have not been relenting on tuition, even though people are not enjoying any of the benefits of the tuition and are basically just learning on YouTube anyway, has left a lot of people with a really bad taste in their mouth, and it is probably going to act as somewhat of a catalyst in a process that was probably going to occur anyway. But I do think that there is going to continue to be a shift away from formal centers of learning, which I think there's a lot of justification for in terms of democratizing education. It is tricky, though. I mean, being that I'm involved in the sciences and I try to think about how that would work with the sciences, it's like, look, you need courses with a laboratory portion. You can't get a chemistry degree without doing any chemistry.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously you have to take tests and you have to. So, but I think that someone's going to figure that out. I think that somewhere along the line, someone is going to figure that out where they will be able to. Obviously, the knowledge you can get online. You can learn the basics of any principle, even science, let alone like literature or economics or something like that. That you can learn entirely.
But it's hard because there's so much pseudoscience as well that for the individual it becomes hard to sort through what is actually accurate and what isn't.
Well, you would be part of a program. I mean, obviously, there are already sites of online learning. That's not new. That's been going on for 10, 15 years or however much. And so there will be content that is sanctioned and approved by that resource. And so, yeah, somebody's going to do it. You have to figure out how to have a testing site. And so when you're done learning everything, you go physically take the test. Or if it's a science, you got to have the laboratory portion. Maybe that'll come last because that's very complicated, But, why can't you people are already getting degrees online. So it's not like that's not possible. You can certainly do that. But yeah, just this thing where, tuition has gone up, 1,000% or whatever it is over the past 20 years, 30 years or however much. I mean, it's just not affordable. It's just not affordable to people. And people are realizing that, I don't like when people are saying like a degree is useless. It's not useless. It has utility. You do learn and you do get jobs and stuff. But once people can figure out how to make some kind of accredited online thing that will still funnel people into the job market, that's going to be a game changer. It's hard. I'm not as entrepreneurial as some. I'm more of an artist philosopher type. So I conceive of these things, but I'm probably not going to be the guy that's going to go and make the Professor Dave School and figure all this out. But I think it's going to happen. I mean, it has to. People can't afford it. People can't afford education anymore.
Right.
So.
No, I feel like you and I can relate in that way because for me, I've always thought. I mean, I love science and I respect science so much, but my mind is more with the arts and my degrees in philosophy. Like that's more of my go-to for sure.
I'm an artist first and foremost. I like to create things and I like to talk. I have a business because that's what enables me to do those things. But But yeah, I like to, that's what I like to spend my time doing. So, but yeah, somebody's going to figure it out, I think, at some point.
Yeah. And so I guess, I don't know if you have any more questions. I only have really one more, and I think we might have already answered it in some way. But how do you think we make critical thinking and knowledge cool for people that kind of find it boring or can't seem to focus on the topic? You know, people that maybe have a genuine interest, but they have these kind of mental blocks or things that just kind of get in the way from them retaining the information, which I think is a huge part a lot of people forget about.
Man, that is a really good question. And it's a really hard one to answer. There's a few ways to do it. I mean, number one, I think lowering the activation energy of learning helps, because I think people get really frustrated when they're like, "Oh, I'm too dumb to learn this" or something. Mm-hmm. But if you really break it down and show them, look, anybody can learn. You know, we're not talking about quantum mechanics. We're talking about just basic stuff, basic chemistry, biology. Anyone can learn this. I think that helps. I think showing them how cool the applications are, like what you can do. I think that's the easiest part. A lot of people love kind of like edutainment, like look at this cool technology, and you're not really getting any comprehension, but it does look cool, and it's very easy to see how cool it is that we can do that. Man, yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that, because it is a good question.
It is. It's like the scientists and programmers have like the shittiest end of the stick and a lot of it, because in terms of like the recognition, because people just hop on their computers, or they hop on to their things. A lot of them don't appreciate what went into it. They don't appreciate the guy that was ripping his hair out trying to code it, or the engineers that trying to figure out the best way to design it, or whatever it might be, or the scientists that kind of came up with it. It's always like the end product of whatever it is cool, but not kind of the prior knowledge that you would get there. And so like that's I feel like if I can bridge that gap, or if we could find a way that we can have someone bridge the gap and share that with science communicators,
get everybody the credit. Yeah,
it'd be just great to have some ability to get under people's kind of under the surface of the skin, so to say, you know,
and perhaps a sense of urgency to bring things full circle to where we started. I mean, I want people to see what is at stake. If they don't understand anything, they will be manipulated. You know, you're going to fall for this hoax and this scam, because this is, they're preying on your ignorance. If you're not ignorant, you won't fall for it. So everybody learns some stuff.
One other question here. I hear about the Cambrian period by YEC. I don't know.
Young Earth creation.
Oh. What's your response?
I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, I know what that is, but I mean, what do they cite that, like, how impossible it was in the Precambrian explosion in the Cambrian explosion for all these species to proliferate so rapidly? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what their gripe is exactly. I mean, I think it's perhaps I'm interpreting the question incorrectly, but if that's what they mean, when we're talking about something like that, we're talking about still a period of, many millions of years. We're not talking about like, oh my God, one day to the next, there's all this stuff. Like, no, it took a really long time. But
well, yeah, I was gonna say they're talking about 85 miles high of fossil layer that happened in less than a year after the flood, right? So like that's in terms of just that alone, it's gonna kind of all you need. I mean, at that point, like, but I don't know. Would you say that's pretty much all you really need to say? It's like, I mean, how do you account for this in such a short period of time, right?
I mean, I guess I'm still not sure what the question is asking then.
Sure, yeah, I guess it would be the implication of what they specifically mean. I'm assuming, at least I'm taking that towards it seems like a weird objection to raise. I don't know what you would use with that, because it's going to kind of presuppose the short duration of time that like anything that we throw at is going to be incompatible with it. But I don't know, maybe I'm just misunderstanding that.
I think it's just a word that creationists pretend to know what it means.
They use
another second law of thermodynamics. It's just another one of those. So
anyway, so Cease, if you want to, I don't know if we'll get a clarification on that, but if not, regardless, Cease, if you want to kind of end it off, or if there's anything you want to say before we get out of here.
Dave, did you want to plug your book? You mentioned in our email changes.
Yeah, so I do. I have a book coming out in March. It's called "Is This Wi-Fi Organic?" A guide to spotting misleading science online.
That's a great title.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm actually reviewing the final the final copy today. It's due tomorrow with all the images and everything. I'm signing off on that today, so they can rush it off to the printers. Yeah, it's coming out in March, and pretty excited about that. It summarizes a lot of it's sort of a combination of what I do with the academic tutorials on my channel and the debunks. So I sort of provide sort of the really basic rudimentary knowledge in chemistry, biochemistry, biology, physics, and then apply it to hoaxes and misinformation, explain why they're not accurate, try to also analyze from a sociological standpoint why it is that people are falling for these hoaxes so that we can sort of diagnose the problem. A lot of the stuff we've been talking about here and much more. So
well, it sounds fascinating. I'll definitely take a look at that once.
Absolutely.
It comes out, so.
Cool.
Yeah, and Dave, thank you again to not keep you. There'll be some graphics or some things that might go at the end. Feel free to just close out if you want. I don't. Sometimes it be like 2 minutes, 1 minute. Sometimes I just skip through it. But yeah, just feel free to whenever you want to back out there. But we do appreciate it. And I'm gonna end off the stream with one more. Well, not one more clip. The exact same clip for people that maybe joined in late and didn't see it. I find it amusing. But again, Dave, thank you so much. And I guess one last thing: is there anything that you have that you want to promote in terms of like an event you're doing? Or I know you don't do debates nearly as much or anything, but would you?
No events. Just just working on the channel relentlessly. So go over to Professor Dave Explains and give it a like.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and thank the audience for sticking through the entire hour and 30 minutes. We really appreciate that. We have an awesome audience that puts way more time than they have to into watching us, and you can choose anywhere to be, and you chose to be here, and we acknowledge that. We love that. So thank you
so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
See you guys.
Number 3. All flat earthers say the same two things about water. The first is water doesn't curve, and the second is water finds its own level. What's most hilarious is that even in the tool called the level, which only works because gravity exists, there is a curved bubble right in there. If the bubble is curved, what is the liquid, which is mostly water, doing around that bubble? It curves. It is absolutely astonishing how the things you repeat from Flat Earth videos are incompatible with even the most trivial everyday observations. You should acknowledge that.
He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave Explains.